Welcome to Happy Talks with Dr. Alice and Donovan. Dr. Alice Fong is a holistic naturopathic doctor and founder of Amor de Soi Wellness. And Donovan Jensen is a software engineer and founder of HowToHappy.com. Together, they're out to cause more happiness in the world.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Happy Talks. Today, I'm very excited to introduce our guest today, Dr. LeGrand Peterson. He is a fellow naturopathic doctor, and he specializes in ADHD, and he treats children and adults. He also has a YouTube channel based on ADHD, and it's called the Optimal Mind Performance. He's also the CEO of Nature's Health Clinic up in Washington State. So please welcome LeGrand, Dr. LeGrand.
Well, thanks for that intro. Just like Dr. Fung just said, I practice here in Washington in the Seattle area and heavily focus a lot on, I have a general practice, but I do heavily focus a lot on ADHD for both children and adults. And basically going more in depth is different using natural medicine, but also using other strategies and techniques, because I also have ADHD and dyslexia. I grew up with it, grew up with all those challenges, and it was challenging going through college and medical school, but implemented a lot of the naturopathic philosophy that really helped me get through college and medical school, and a lot of different other learning styles and techniques and stuff like that, that now I use with my patients and able to get results and success with them by implementing those things.
Awesome. Great. And what was your story or your journey into becoming a naturopathic doctor?
Yeah, so for me, so it's a kind of lengthy one, but I guess the kind of shorter version. So like I said, since I had those challenges growing up with dyslexia and ADHD, I really hated schooling a lot. It was a big challenge for me, and I thought I would go in and do like a trade profession, kind of like my dad. He owns a landscape company. I thought I was maybe going to do that, or maybe do construction or something like that didn't really require a whole lot of schooling, because I just hated schooling altogether. But I was at a time, I was 14 at the time, and I'm a religious person, and so I believe that for me, that if anybody was going to know what my path was going to be, God was going to know that. And after a lot of soul searching, fasting and praying and stuff like that, came to this conclusion that I was supposed to be this natural doctor. And I had no idea what that was at the time. I had no idea. Didn't know what that exists. Didn't know a natural doctor even existed. Because back, 14, naturopathic medicine was not really well known in Washington at that time. It was kind of starting to get there. And I told my parents about it, and we had just moved into a neighborhood, and they mentioned to me, they're like, hey, there's actually some doctor that's some kind of like naturopath or natural doctor of some sort. It was our neighbor. We just moved in the neighborhood area. So I went to go meet him and have him tell me all about naturopathic medicine. And I was like, this is it. This is what I was looking for. So he told me about Bastyr University. And so basically at age 14, I planned out a roadmap to be able to get to that, to become a naturopathic doctor. Now, it wasn't easy. And I was telling God, I'm like, that's what you want me to be as a doctor? Like, that is the most challenging thing. I'm like, I'm going to need a lot of help then. You're going to have to make me really smart or something, or at least have a better desire to want to learn. And, and also become magically smarter. But I certainly did have a greater desire to learn, because I had that passion of knowing this was supposed to be my calling, to do that. And through that, I would go to the library consistently. The librarians knew me really well. I always had books on tapes or books covering my face, always checking out, all the time, books and tapes, and listening to all sorts of just like self-help tapes, or books, study skills, reading, speaking skills, like all sorts of stuff. I consumed it all. And I, over the grind of learning all that kind of stuff, I was learning things that were working and weren't working and stuff like that, and molding it for my challenges with dyslexia and ADHD, and was able to go to college a little early. It's what they call running start. And so I went to community college at Green River Community College, went through that, but it never stopped there. I mean, I failed my very first chemistry class, which is really important to get into medical school. It's the reason why they call it the Weeder class. In fact, my professor told me to drop out of the medical profession. He said I sucked at science. Made me cry, basically just like kind of try to destroy my dreams right there and then. But good thing I didn't listen to him. I retook the chemistry class with a different professor that was easier to work with, more understanding, and I got an A. So, but I didn't stop there. I went and did I did great in the rest of general chemistry class because I stuck with the same teacher. Then I took organic chemistry and failed my first organic chemistry class. So at this point, most people would have just given up. But because I knew this was my calling, and because I knew that's what God wanted me to do, I knew that's what I need to do. So going through that grind and learning techniques and having that belief system as well, instead of having excuses. So what I really work with a lot of patients is trying to help them first find that passion, especially with people who have ADHD, to find that passion really makes a huge difference. It doesn't matter what kind of challenge you do have. If you can find that passion, and I'm not saying just because if you're not religious, it doesn't matter. Finding that passion for yourself certainly can make a huge difference in the drive for yourself and finding a way, no matter how difficult it's going to be. And so for me, failing also the organic chemistry class, I retook with a different teacher, was able to pass. Then there was a second organic chemistry class. I failed that one, had to retake that one. So, I mean, it's just like this consistent vicious cycle. People would have just totally given up completely. I mean, I almost did. But good thing I didn't. I stuck with it because I had the ultimate goal. And then things did start getting easier. When I went to medical school, it wasn't also magically easy, but certain strategies I implemented, I was still able to get through medical school. I was still able to graduate within 4 years, whereas like half of my classmates had to do it in 5 years, as you know, Dr. Fung, which is, it should be a 5-year program because of all the different things that we have to do. And learn. It isn't just becoming a medical doctor. It's also becoming a nutritionist. It's becoming, herbal expert, physical therapist, all these kind of things that, they implement in naturopathic medical school. So that's what really led me into really naturopathic medicine. But then coming out of medical school, I even did additional rotation rounds in ADHD with Dr. Raymer. I don't know if you remember Dr. Raymer. She specializes in ADHD. She's both an MD and an ND. And so I did several rotations with her. I also did additional classes with her on focusing on ADHD and autism. And I knew that was going to be my passion. But when I got out into the world, started my practice. Well, I first started at a clinic and just saw anybody. And then when I started my own practice, same thing. I was just seeing anybody and kind of lost sight of that vision. And then I realized that's what I needed to focus on. Because it's something I struggled with, but I also became successful with that. And I started working with patients and focusing my target on that, helping with people with ADHD for both adults and for children. And that's been more of my passion. That's why I started a whole YouTube channel, just focus on basically ADHD. So yeah, that's my story in a nutshell.
I love it. Yeah, no, I can really relate because I kind of found my path to becoming a naturopathic doctor pretty early on. You had me beat at 14. I was 17 when
Okay.
before I even knew what I was going to major in my undergrad. I was like,
wow.
I met a doctor at a herb festival and I was like, this sounds awesome. And then I went all this research and I was like, yes, this is what I want to do.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Right.
So I had a question about like kind of, that journey that you took. So you said, you had some of this ADHD stuff that you were working through and you listened to like a bunch of books and read some books and stuff. Did you find that more general, just kind of like going through any book in that genre was helpful, or were you targeting like specific books to help you with specific things?
That's a good question. I would say I was well, it took a while because it was all through trial and error, right? What I found that worked for me, and I find a lot of people with ADHD, not every ADHD person does, but tend to have more of the creative mind. I loved art. I thought I was going to be an artist before I was going to be a naturopathic doctor, but my dad said, you're not going to make money in art, which if I knew how today was, there's plenty enough artists now that can make it. So, but whatever. I still dabble in art in my creativity. But So I knew I had to target things that worked for me as far as learning techniques. So I found curriculum that focused on the very unconventional way of learning. Because the conventional way of learning is basically logical and linguistics. So whether it's, just verbal and hearing lectures and stuff like that, or listening to lectures, or reading books, or the logical, the mathematical stuff. That's how school structure is structured. They don't focus on the creative way of like visual learning or hands-on, or even music is another way, or what we call is interpersonal or intrapersonal, which is, discovering more about your inner self of using tactics that way, or working in groups, which I found very beneficial at last year at Naturopathic Medical School, was actually working in groups. If I didn't have working with groups, that I would have failed a lot more tests for sure if I did not. So yeah, so answering your question, I think for me, it was targeting certain needs for myself, but also with ADHD, it's so complex because it isn't just health, right? It's also the mentality, the struggle that we deal with on a daily basis, that, we're forgetting things, we're very inattentive, but we can be very focused if we find that passion and focus and that drive. Also being hyperactive. There's also the behavior stuff. It's a combination of a whole different things. So I had also look at a lot of personal development stuff too. I grew up listening to Zig Ziglar, old time. He's dead now, rest his soul. I love that guy, but never got to meet him. But he's a motivational speaker. I used to listen to my dad's old tapes that he had. My dad was in his early days was trying to be a hotshot salesman for Amway back in that day, but he changed his profession. But so he helped me kind of motivate. And I listened to Tony Robbins growing up, some other motivational speakers as well. And that helped me to keep myself motivated, and also the mentality of positive thinking. I think with ADHD, a lot of people forget about that, and they realize, okay, I have ADHD, so it sucks. I'm always going to have this problem, so therefore, why even try? It's true that they have the problem, right? I get it. I've been there. I'm still there. Still deal with my daily challenges with it. But thinking that way is not going to get you anywhere. You have to realize, yes, you're going to have to work. It's probably 2 times, 3 times, 5 times harder than other people. And that's been my life story. And I'm used to it. And it's fine. But even behind that, realizing that because you have to work that hard, you can become more of an exceptional person and successful person because of that challenge. Challenges actually make us greater. And people need to realize that. Even with anxiety, same thing, right? Dr. Fung, when you're working with people with anxiety, it's a challenge in itself. But because they have that challenge, they finally sought out after you to get health, to focus better. Because you can have somebody that has no challenges ever. Let's just take health, for example. No challenges whatsoever. And they go through life never having an issue, never focusing on their health. They eat crappy, and then they hit 60, and then they got a huge health crisis because they had this silent killer, right? So, I mean, you take it as it is. I think with anything in life, if there is nothing to challenge you, it doesn't develop you to become something better, whether it's health, behavior, religion, spirituality, whatever it might be. You do have to be challenged. And so I think that's why I help people try to understand with HD. And that's what I had to do with myself, is focusing on that.
So it sounds like there's kind of like 2 components built into there. One is like the mindset, the part of like getting in the right headspace to be motivated, or like to find the things that drive you. And then there's the other piece of actually like exploring and kind of understanding some of the pathways to help you overcome the specific challenge. And this is more, I mean, this applies to ADHD, but it sounds very general, where it's just like, there's the one piece, like, okay, I know what I want to do. And then the actual work of like figuring out what works for you. So I think that's like a really nice insight to pull out of there that's generally applicable.
Yeah, no, and then also like there's also the other aspect of what we call is the biochemical physiology of our body, right? That's what Dr. Fung and I do a lot, is finding out what are the imbalances in the body chemistry. So really there's kind of like 3 components in itself. There's the mental, emotional, the mentality aspect, there's the physical aspect, and then there's the biochemical aspect, the body's physiology. And you have to address that by running tests and labs and seeing what's out of balance for. So for my patients, it's really looking at where the nutritional deficiencies going on, what are the imbalances in the brain and the metabolism, the body chemistry, what is out of balance. And once we know that, then we know what to implement. Too many people, and this is one of my big pet peeves, is that and I'm on lots of different HD social media groups and stuff like that. And so I read lots of the comments. Mm-hmm. And people get frustrated about natural medicine because it doesn't work, or it does work. And the reason it doesn't work for people, and I just did a video on this, is it's not individualized care. Anytime you use natural medicine that's not individualized, it's not going to, 9 times out of 10, it's not going to work, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. Maybe you might be lucky and hit that 8 times out of 10 or whatever, because you're pretty much just shooting at a dart blindfolded and hoping that you're going to hit the target. Because then you're taking something that you have no idea if you need it or not. You have to first find out what's out of balance. People are like, take magnesium for ADHD. It worked great for me. Well, might work for you, but if the other person isn't magnesium deficient, then it's not going to work for them. They're not going to see results from it. Same with fish oils, same thing. It's just like, that's I think people have to realize when they are using natural medicine for where there's anxiety, ADHD, you have to find out if there's issues in the first place, and what are they.
Yeah, that's very, very true. And that it's not just like shooting in the dark. You really need a personalized touch to it to really get the best out of natural medicine. And there's a lot of things that people don't realize, that it's like not like one supplement isn't a fix all for every
exactly
type of condition, essentially. Yeah. And I'm curious, Dr. LeGrand, like, since I am an anxiety and stress expert, and you are an expert in ADHD, what would you say is the difference between the two?
Yeah, so a good question, because that's what we're going to lead into that topic is and people ask me this too, is how do you know, especially if you haven't been diagnosed with ADHD, people try to decide, okay, is it anxiety or is it ADHD? And the best indicator on this is with anxiety, it is more episodic, right? So it happens in episodes depending on the circumstance. So let's just take a college student, for example, who might be figuring out what's the problem. Do I have anxiety or do I have an ADHD? Okay. And doctors get this wrong all the time, which I think people really should be also focusing on their own self-care, making sure they're getting the right diagnosis as well. Because not enough doctors have enough training in this to diagnose someone with ADHD or differentiate between ADHD and anxiety. It gets misdiagnosed all the time. And the biggest indicator when I'm asking questions is it's more like, okay, how often is this happening to you? So let's just take, for example, brain fog. Okay. Well, that could be an anxiety situation or it could be an ADHD situation, right? Where you're just mind blanks and wander, right? So you need to recall, okay, is this episodic where this happens when I take a test or I'm in school or in a social situation where I get anxiety about being in a social situation and that's happening? So that's episodic. That's what I would say is more anxiety. Whereas for ADHD, it's happening consistently on a daily basis, all the time. That's the difference, is you're finding that you're having these moments consistently on, like for me, I still do. Like I still will blank out a lot and I have to refocus all the time. And I use strategies to get myself to refocus. And the thing is 50%, there's statistics on they run statistics on this. 50% of people with ADHD have anxiety as well. So that makes that confusing as well. Is, wow, okay, do I have ADHD or anxiety, or do I have both? There's a very high chance you have both, but you have to also separate the two. And especially when it comes to treatment, same thing, especially if you're going to go the route of medications or natural medicine, whichever route you go through, you got to realize, okay, is it just anxiety? And you have to ask yourself, how often is this happening to me? Is this happening to me multiple times in a day? Or is this happening a couple times out of the week? It really depends. Now there's people, the extreme cases, as you know, Dr. Fong, where anxiety, it is a daily thing, but sometimes it's situational too. So is it happening just in the morning or at night, in the middle of the day? Whereas ADHD, it's like all day long. It's always coming with issues, whether it's hyperactivity, inattentiveness, impulsivity, for children, and for, adults still leads into also with adults, but you have to realize how often this is happening. And that's how you really kind of differentiate the two, that I find the best ways.
So I had a question about that. Is there, because you've kind of described it as ADHD is kind of like a more constant, and anxiety seems to come in like waves and ebbs and flows and be situational. Is there a difference between like different types of intensity? So by that I mean, like, does the anxiety often come in patterns of like you were saying, at some points it happens and other points it doesn't? Is that sort of the same? Like, will you see that sort of pattern with ADHD where sometimes it's worse and sometimes it's not as bad, or is that more of an anxiety thing?
Right. So this is a good question, because this also depends on what treatment you're taking currently with ADHD, right? So if you're taking medications, you're going to see ups and downs. If you're not taking anything and you're a clean slate, you're going to see more patterns that are more consistent. But then you also have anxiety that are kicking in if you have that issue. With a lot of people with ADHD, they do. And so that's why it's kind of hard to differentiate if this is an anxiety situation or an ADHD, or if it's a combination of both that's going on that are being escalated. And this is where I think why individualized care is so crucial when it comes to treatment. And this is why I'm not a big fan of diagnosis, in my opinion, being diagnosed with ADHD or anxiety. In fact, I did a video about this, of the downfalls of having the label or the ADHD diagnosis, because then you're only going to be treated as such. You're not going to be treated throughout your life. If you have fatigue, for example, they're going to think it's maybe the medication. So we got to adjust that. When it could be, you might be anemic. You might have malnourishment going on, or food allergy, or who knows? It could be other imbalances in your biochemistry that have been missed. And this is where, Dr. Fung and I, we look at more specific individualized imbalances in the body. So we're looking at it as an individual versus your diagnosis, because I think that's where you're going to find the best benefits, because then you're addressing it in that sense, finding more of the root cause of the problem versus just, okay, let's try this medication because you're having an anxiety moment. And then if you're not having an anxiety moment, also take this medication, because that's what happens. You get this laundry list of different stimulant medications for also depression. We're forgetting about depression too. So, that's very common amongst people with ADHD as well. So yeah, then it just, patients have no idea why they're taking these certain medications, because they've been labeled with all these different things and they're not addressing the actual root cause.
Yeah, I know, having personal experience, not so much with the ADHD side, but with the anxiety and depression side, there are many, many factors that come into play and influence it. So it makes so much more sense to me to take a more holistic approach and look at your entire life to kind of think about what it is that sets things off. Because I know if I start eating bad, even though, normally I wouldn't think, oh, there's a direct connection here. I know if I start eating unhealthy, I have a much higher chance of feeling those like depression symptoms. Yep. Same with exercise, same with socializing, same with, just all kinds of random things factor into it that I would never normally think like, oh, here's the direct line.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I mean, kind of hit on that point is the fact that you can't just address whether there's anxiety, depression, ADHD, all mental health, right? That we're really kind of talking about here. There's two really main tackles to this, is the aspect of the mental health. Like I said, well, there are three, and then there's the physical. Like if there's any brain damage, that's what I mean by physical. If there's any brain damage, then of course that's going to be a contributing factor. But if there is not, and it's just the mentality, the mental health aspect, the mindset, and then of course the biophysiology. And if you don't address both and you only address one, then, like, for example, if we only address just the mindset, you're still going to have, if there's imbalances in your biochemistry, it's still going to be an issue. And then if we only address just the mindset and you have imbalances in the body chemistry, then again, it's just, they both have to be addressed. Otherwise, you're going to always have this consistent problem. And, people ask me, okay, does ADHD go away? I always tell people, look, it's a part of you. It's who you are. And that's why I don't like it as a label, because we have this negative tone thinking that ADHD is so bad. Yes, it's more of a challenge, but you need to just know how to live with your ADHD. Because there is benefits. I like calls them more like the superpower. People in the ADHD community don't like that term, superpower with ADHD. When it does actually really exist, you just need to know how to find it and then channel it and use it more towards your benefit. Like I said, the challenge itself in a way can be a superpower, because it only makes you to become better having a challenge like that, because then you're not like everybody else. And to me, I don't want to be the average person. I've never find it, beneficial to be normal. That's the other thing. The other terminology that I really got a big pet peeve about is that, I want to be normal. That's a big term in the ADHD community, or parents who want their kids to be normal. It's like, why? Why do you want to be normal? Who says having ADHD is not normal? What is normal today? Like, there's plenty of successful people with ADHD and dyslexia and all these different challenges, anxiety and depression, that are very, very successful and live very successfully with it. They just found ways to be able to improve it because they looked at all aspects in their health and their well-being and their mentality to be able to work with it. And because they did that, they're a better person versus the average person that didn't have problems. They eventually will have problems, because they never ever address it until they get older. So.
Right. That's so super, super true. And I really get that, challenges. I completely agree with the idea that, challenges and obstacles in our life is how we grow and to develop ourselves. And in a way, it's, if you watch any superhero movies, usually they have some burden challenge
yep.
to overcome.
Superman, the kryptonite, and
right. Exactly. If it was like they never had any challenge, that would be a super boring movie.
It would be a super boring movie, exactly.
But anyways, for people that don't have ADHD, what would you suggest for perhaps just increasing your focus? Because that's something everyone.
So that's a good question, because that's, I think, a lot of patients I do see that usually want better improvement in focus and attention, because even if you don't have ADHD, everyone does have some shape or form where they struggle with focus and attention. And this really does, I get spout off, certain herbs and supplements and things that you can take. If you're looking for the best results, it goes back to that individualized care. And for most cases, if we look at diet, for example, the biggest problem I see is usually people who tend to have brain fog, inattentiveness issues, or just, moments. It's because they either have very, very high diet in processed foods, high diet in, simple carbs, and not a well-balanced whole foods diet where you're getting good proteins, vegetables, and healthy fats. That's what's usually missing in the nutritional piece. But diving in deeper is seeing what kind of nutritional deficiencies that you do have. And you have to run that through labs, right? You have to run that through labs to see what is out of balance. And so what do you need to implement? And then, of course, there's the aspect of course, strategies, implementing different strategy and techniques. And I mentioned about one is, of course, the positive mindset. And one of my best, I think the best technique is what I always tell people: if you have a destiny, so if your destiny is to have better focus and you have a competitive edge in your profession, right? To be the best of the best, like, you want to have the superpower brain. And my channel is called Optimal Mind Performance, because I actually do find a lot of people on my channel who don't have ADHD still find the videos I do that are beneficial, because a lot of these strategies are also beneficial to other people because they also have these challenges, maybe not as often as people with ADHD, but they're still can be implemented for anybody. And it is, if you have a destiny, right? I always like to kind of look at this pyramid thing. So your destiny is to have this superpower mindset focus, right? It all starts down at the bottom of the pyramid is association. Okay. So if you have a destiny in something, it all starts with association. So what that means is, who do you hang out with? What do you listen to? What do you read? all makes a big impact. So the association should be, like I said, positive mindset. So listening to motivational people, reading books on that, hanging out with people who challenge your brain, maybe well-educated people, or at least who are wanting to challenge themselves to be more educated, right? It could be a reading group. It could be, a social media group. It could be lots of different things in that. So that's association. Then that association leads to also habits, because then you want to start being like those people as well, because you're hanging out with these people and you start learning and techniques and stuff like that. And then those habits lead to your character, which then those character then leads to eventually to your destiny. So anything, I always tell people, if you ever have a goal set, that's how you have to look at it, is what your destiny is. You always have to start with associations, with then association leads to, I forgot a step, leads to your mindset. Association leads to mindset. Mindset then leads to habits. Habits leads to character. And then obviously your character leads to the destiny of the person that you want to be. So that's in a nutshell, but really going back to, there's a lot of different techniques. And I mean, for people who are, who do have ADHD, and I think we'll mention about this before, but I do have a downloadable guide that goes over the labs, the supplements, nutrients, foods, and what foods to avoid, that Dr. Fong will probably put a link in the description below to provide if people are interested in that as well.
Yes, definitely. We will include that link in the description. So check it out and get Dr. LeGrand's guide. Was there anything else you'd like to plug?
I mean, I guess you could check out the channel too if you do have ADHD. It's definitely heavily focused on ADHD, but like I said, even if you don't have ADHD, if you're looking for, because on the channel I do talk, I kind of go through different series. So I go through usually health, so a lot of different health topics on specifically for ADHD or just improving the mind. And then I also go over school tactics, strategies, whether you're a parent or who has a kid with ADHD, or if you're a college student or learning anything. I talk about different school strategies and tactics. I talk about relationships, because that's an issue with people with ADHD, is relationships and how to work with that. Me being with ADHD and have a wife and a couple kids. So I'd share different strategies on that. I talk about life and work balance with basically tactics and strategies if you have ADHD, or even if you feel like you have some of those symptoms of ADHD, because sometimes people have a hard time holding down a job or finding that passion. And I talk about those as well. And then, I talk about a lot of different things as far as when it comes to a lot of different ADHD challenges and implementing those things. Yeah.
Great. Well, it sounds like a super valuable resource, especially right now during COVID. Parents schooling kids, probably kids driving them bonkers.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Benefits from your channel, Optimal Mind Performance. It's awesome. I would highly recommend you all check it out. And Dr. LeGrand, thank you so much for being our guest today.
Yeah.
It's been a pleasure.
You can check out more content at howtohappy.com. Also, don't forget to subscribe so you can stay up to date on the videos. We've also got a Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook that you can check out. Reflect, take action, and enjoy life. See you next time.